So we've touched on what is kind of new customer acquisition, what are the challenges that you face within that, and then kind of demand gen versus demand capture. I think one kind of umbrella point for all of this, which is probably worth another video in itself, is creative, which there's a lot to unpack there. But for context, obviously, at SOZO, obviously you know this, but for context for our viewers, for our most ambitious clients, we run them through this kind of two-stage process. Stage one being a persona scoping workshop, where we essentially segment their audience into characteristics that we call personas. Some of them are existing, some of them are kind of more of an opportunity for us to identify growth patterns. We then let that feed into our creative workshop, which pretty much influences our whole strategy across all of our paid media channels. It'd be good to get some insight from you, Tom, in terms of what that looks like in practice. So like, what's the importance of doing this persona exercise? What does it help us achieve? And maybe some examples as to how that influences creative.
Yeah, I think touching on it, obviously we've talked about if you identify if your issue as a business is, is it customer retention and upselling and returning, or is it actually needing new customers? If it's needing new customers, then you need to be able to speak to them in the right ways. You need to know who they are. And I think that's what we've done a lot over the last 6 to 12 months is really, here at SOZO particularly, is understand we can no longer get away with just delivering generic creative or messaging. That's not going to cut through the noise necessarily. What we need to be doing is really thinking about who's buying from us and why, and what our unique positioning potentially is in the market. And it doesn't even have to be unique positioning, actually. It just has to be valuable positioning for the prospective client or customer. So that's really important. We've done a lot of work on our, like you say, the persona workshop, and understanding and identifying with our clients who's buying from them, psychographics, not necessarily demographics, but psychographics, and ultimately, what's the reason to buy? And if we can identify elements around that, then what we can then do is make it a tangible piece of work that then informs our creative briefing or our creative production. I'm from that kind of school of thought as a marketer, where I used to do, persona work 10, 15 years ago when I first started in, even at uni, you do personas, but it was that kind of, okay, cool. How do I make this tangible? How do I use this? And I think the common misconception with personas traditionally has been you use that information to try and then manually target these people.
Yeah.
That is definitely not the way to do it now. It's use that information to speak to those people. Particularly in the social platforms, Meta, your creative is now your targeting in most cases. So you need to, it will deliver based on resonance with certain types of people. And that needs to be done to a high standard. As you know, we've put a lot of long hours into building out valuable persona workshops for our clients and learning that piece internally, as well as educating clients externally on the importance of doing it. And most of the times when we've done these workshops, we've found that clients didn't really have much concept of who's actually buying from them. They knew their product well, they knew their space well, but they didn't really understand why people were buying from them. Or they might have one very particular case scenario of a persona, and it wasn't particularly fleshed out. So this exercise has allowed us to find so many angles of opportunity for us to go, okay, how do we brief in creative production? Because that is really difficult. It's very easy to say to a client, okay, we need content, we need creative if we're going to make your marketing work on paid channels. Particularly in clients in our space and our size, often they don't have the resource, the experience, and it's that kind of the question back, or the look back to us is, okay, how do I do this? How am I supposed to do this? So something that we've done a lot of work on is trying to bridge that gap or the conceptual gap from persona through to how do we use this tangibly. We do creative workshops, so we teach clients and educate clients on how to construct different types of creative. We then overlay that with angles and concepts for creative production based on the personas that we've produced. And that gives a really nice throughput for clients to then understand, okay, this is who I'm speaking to, these are the drivers and basically the hooks that I need to hit, and this is the type of content I need to produce. And we found, particularly with a couple of clients, it's not actually as overwhelming and as difficult as they thought it might be. And they've done a really good job of getting that regular cadence of production into their current workflows, and it's we've seen the difference, haven't we? You know,
Yeah, I think VA Fabrics is a great example of that. And I think probably one worth mentioning in the general conversation of, I think a lot of clients look at creative like, am I a new, trendy, funky brand business that fits being creative? When in reality, we've learned through doing this process of scoping your personas out specifically and in detail that creative is for everyone. It just depends on how you apply it. I mean, VA Fabrics is a great example, right? They're constantly churning out content, and they're very proactive with it in a way that I personally didn't expect when we first presented that.
And it's high quality, like really high quality. And I think gone are the days, you know, particularly when I started, even, you know, a few years ago, it was take what you can get, copy and paste some product imagery with
do a
white
brand
background.
video.
Even if that, like we didn't even have that. It was do a catalog ad in Meta. It's just not sufficient enough. You know, if you think, I always say this, is that if you are the consumer, if you saw that, why on earth would that make you in any way interested in that business or that offer or that?
Because you need to put yourself in their shoes to some degree, right? It's got to be relatable. It's got to be,
exactly. And it's
relevant.
just that mindset shift of, it used to be every thought I can just market, I can put my budget in, I can be aggressive, I can do my targeting, I can put a product in front of people and they'll buy it. And that 100% isn't the case anymore. The biggest influencing factor is the creative itself. You know, that does most of the work. Back to traditional marketing, you know, Ogilvy days and, you know, classic marketing techniques. It's all about the message and the angle. It's not about the technical ability to get in front of people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.